Bless your heart, you are a good man. Thank you. It is such a privilege to be here. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it.
Woo!
I want to thank Patty. And I am so thrilled to not be standing here and feel shame, because I am going to tell you that I don't agree with the damn mandated vaccine. And I don't agree with the vaccine pass. And I'm a nurse. And how can I say that? How can I say it? I can say it because of the experience I've had. That's all. I can't tell you what to do. I don't intend to. Please, if you want to be vaccinated, do so. But if you do not, that is your choice. Anyway, I'm going to read because I'll probably forget what I want to say. So, voluntary informed consent. Death is not my enemy. It never has been. 38 years of nursing, and I have been with a lot of people who have died. We die, people. We die. So that's not my enemy. Fear is my enemy, and fear has always been my enemy. Always. Anyway, I'll stick with the script. Hello, my name is Carolyn. I'm a registered nurse, currently employed by Nova Scotia Health Authority. I am 71 years old. I've been a nurse since 1983. I came out of retirement 19 months ago to work the pandemic. My last 10 years of nursing prior to my retirement was at East Coast Forensic in Burnside. I happen to love that job. But I have worked in multiple areas, including long-term care, with AIDS patients in Florida. I was worried that East Coast Forensic would become overwhelmed. So, when the call came, I stepped forward. East Coast Forensic did not. They did absolutely fine. But before I was even hired back by Nova Scotia Health Authority, they begged me to go to Northwood. They begged, because Northwood was in a very big crisis. It was in a mess. You remember back then, everybody was tied to their TV. Anyway, so Northwood's a 485-bed long-term care facility here in Halifax. And anyway, just prior to my arrival at Northwood, approximately 200 staff people walked off the job. They were frightened, they were worried, and perhaps they even lacked protective equipment, because I understand that some unions said that they did, and that was being denied. No, they don't lack protective equipment. Anyway, by the time I got there was some protective equipment, and there was some masks, and there was some gowns, and that sort of thing. But the place was still in chaos. You don't take 200 staff or 200 healthcare people out of a facility and expect it to run. It was short-staffed way before this ever started, and O'Neill knew that whole deal, and he knew that it was short-staffed. So did Dr. Strang. The whole world knew that it was short-staffed. It's been chronically understaffed. Plus, it's crowded. You don't put 4 people in a room and expect that they're not going to get sick. Flu season happens every year, folks. Every year. Every year, as far back as I can remember, flu season has happened. And flu season does become difficult for elderly people. That's true. Anyway, so to go on with my story, I better keep reading or I'll get carried away. So the 200 folks, they did go out all within a couple days. So there was crisis. And some of the staff that were still there were pretty upset with their colleagues, right? That's just the way it is. That's the way it is. So they were thrilled that I was there. In fact, they were just thrilled to death, right? I worked with a nurse that came from Alberta to help. I worked with people who were members of the board that they hadn't probably been anywhere close to a nursing home in years, right? I remember one night shift, there was 4 of us on, and only one of us knew anybody on the floor, right? That's just the way it was, right? Anyway, that went on for 12 weeks. But, I want to tell you, I believe Northwood itself brought up all these problems to political players, right? Asking for more staff and asking for changes in how the people were housed. These requests were denied, and consequently, Northwood was the most vulnerable long-term care facility in this province. And so they did lose 53 people. And any death is not a nice death, right? But I'm just going to tell you, we die. And that's part of life too. So anyway, flu is a viral illness, and elderly people, especially those with additional illnesses, do not do well during flu season, right? Anyway, to make a long story short, I worked at Northwood 12 weeks at the beginning of the pandemic. During the pandemic. During this time, 53 of the 485 residents died at Northwood. To say that the place was chaotic is an understatement, but fortunately for me, this time when I arrived, there was personal protective equipment available to me. But the news reports by politicians and officers of health saying things were under control. They were not. But I am a nurse. We carry on. We do the best we can. And I'm an old nurse. So when the doctor says something, you kind of go along with them because that's what old nurses do. You understand? So I kind of said, well, okay, he's just trying to keep everybody calm, right? Anyway, I was hailed as a hero for going to work. Yeah, police and firefighters would come by and honk their horns to give to support the staff. Meals were sent in by various kind-hearted people. There was a little lady who used to stand there in the morning and wave because she had a relative in that facility. And she'd wave every morning. There were lots of things I didn't like at Northwood. Shortage of staff, no way of knowing which residents were which, and positive COVID-19 patients sharing rooms with negative patients. And that was from the get-go. But I began to understand that all COVID-19 was contagious, and it was, eventually testing positive at least 250 people. Why? Possibly because there were often 4 people to a room sharing one bathroom. But all these folks recovered. That's it. 250 elderly people with various different illnesses. They were old. Nobody gets into a nursing home when you're in your 20s. It just don't work that way. So, we had 100-year-olds who got the COVID and got better. And I started thinking, oh, well, folks, you did not hear that very much then, and you sure as heck don't hear it now. You do not hear it now. We had been fed a diet of fear for the past 2 years almost. So anyway, some did not even know they were ill, but some were a little more sick, that's true. But anyway, I cannot say this enough, and the most surprising thing of all to me is that about 30 elderly people, and they were from all over the facility, they weren't just one ward, 30 elderly people throughout the place did not get sick. They didn't test positive. Explain that to me. And then explain to me how Dr. Strang can so glibly say when the 22 young men happened to have the myocarditis, he can glibly look at him and say, well, if you had COVID, you would. They might have been one of those 30 people, folks. They might have. You can't predict that. Anyway, I'm sorry. I started to get angry. I get really passionate. Meanwhile, out in the community, lockdowns are taking places. Churches are being denied the right to meet in parking lots. In parking lots, for God's sakes. Did you hear that? Out in Jador somewhere, they were in parking lots, and Strang closed them down. Give me a break. Anyway. Okay, and kids were kept home from schools. Walking parks were considered out of bounds. Do you remember that? You couldn't walk in the park. Because it was going to kill you. Anyway, funerals were curtailed. Neighbors were washing down their groceries before bringing them in the house. Even during the worst shooting in Nova Scotia history, people had to mourn alone. Think about that. Just think about that. It just boggles my mind when I think about it now. It makes me angry. But I was staying under the radar. I wasn't saying anything, folks. I really wasn't. But every single positive case was broadcast far and wide, and draconian rules were implemented. Nova Scotia became a jail. Fear gripped the populace. people were continually told of the dreaded COVID-19. Rarely, if ever, were the messages given that far more than 95% of the population, if they should get it, would be like a flu-like illness, and it's even more than 95%. Yeah. Truly. Yeah. Anyway. My work at the testing center consists of doing PCR tests. The worst part of this is giving the tests to little kids. And I will not be here, folks, in 20 years, but I guarantee you that you're going to see a class action lawsuit from these kids. Because they're going to say, hey, that didn't need to be done. That didn't need to be done. And if you have not lived until you have watched parents holding their children while I put a swab in their nose and they're screaming and they're terrified. And why do I do it? I do it because I try to make it easier for the kid and for the parent, and because I'm good at it, and because I'm a nurse. That's what nurses do. We nurse. Well, sorta. That might be changing. We'll see. Anyway, by mid-July, most of the staff had returned, and I was put in quarantine, and I went to the testing drive-through, and I've been there about a year and a half. So Nova Scotia Health Authority is going to make some rules that are going to change things as to whether or not you can keep your job. Now, you have to remember, I've only ever worked the pandemic, folks. I haven't worked anything else. I've only ever worked with people who had COVID. Some of them had COVID. We had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people driving through, and some of them had COVID. And yes, I wore gloves, and yes, I wore a mask. And no, I didn't get sick. Will I? I don't know. Will I die? I don't know. I am going to die someday. But in the meantime, I will not be afraid. I'm just going to finish up. I'll stop doing all this. The big thing, that the reason that I finally decided that I had to stand up here and say something, people, is because there was an emergency room doctor in Sydney, and I read his story. And the man went on the radio, and he says, I don't think that mandating vaccines is a good idea. And he says, I really don't think we should be vaccinating the kids. And he was lambasted, fired from his job, and it just made me so ashamed of myself. I said, that's it, Carolyn, you've got to step forward, you've got to say your piece. I used to whisper to the people sometimes going through, hey, there was 250 people that got better, but I'm just letting you know that, hey, Dr. Strang, Nova Scotia Health Authority is who fired him. And he was told, and I have that, and I believe that with everything that's said, the health authority told people, do not speak out. When have you ever told a nurse not to speak out? You can't do that. Voluntary informed consent, it's been the credo since I started nursing in 1983. Anyway, I'm sorry to get passionate. Sorry. Thank you very much for listening.